Hey folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new Arctic Monkeys album titled AM. Now, everybody has specific sounds that they don't like. Nails on a chalkboard, the rasp of metal against rocks, the chipmunk voice effect. Basically some sort of sound that just sets your teeth on edge and just leaves you with a sour taste in your mouth. It's not often something that you can help either. It's a gut instinct. It's a subconscious emotional reaction to something in the sound that just makes you feel queasy or just triggers that element of dispassionate loathing. And as a music critic, this impulse is absolutely infuriating for me because it often prevents me from being as objective as I'd like when evaluating the material. It basically prevents me from doing my job effectively. And given as hard as I've striven to be professional, it really bothers the hell out of me. And if we're going to talk about a band that leaps to the top of that list of sounds that get on my nerves in a real big hurry, the Arctic Monkeys would be that band. I know, it's crazy. I can't explain it, no matter how hard I've tried. I doubt I'll even be able to properly explain it in this review. Something about this band, whether it's the lead singer Alex Turner's vocals or songwriting, just gets on my nerves in ways I really can't comprehend. I'm going to try and intellectualize this instinctive reaction in some way throughout this review, see if I can parse out some of it, because the more calculating and rational parts of my mind are telling me that I should like the Arctic Monkeys. The guitar work is catchy and interesting, they're good songwriters, and hell, Alex Turner isn't that far from Billy Joe Armstrong in his vocal delivery, at least in those first two albums. So where's this antipathy coming from? What is it about this band that alienates me so much? Well, if I were to hazard a guess, I'm thinking that some of it comes from two factors, neither of which are all that fair to the Arctic Monkeys, at least in terms of judging their execution. First is in the subject matter and delivery. Alex Turner comes across both as acerbic and bitter and sour in his songwriting and the delivery right out of the gate. Starting on that first album, Whatever People Say I Am, that's what I'm not. And what strikes me as out of place is that the target of said anger seems to be the activity of going out and partying and having a good time. And sure, I get where said subject matter can easily be reinterpreted with a dark or sarcastic twist, but Alex Turner doesn't seem to be going like that. He seems to be that douchebag who stands morosely at the bar after you drag him out after a long protest, and then he spends the rest of the night complaining, arguing with the bouncer, being a creep with girls, and blaming it all on you at the end of the night. It'd be like dragging Morrissey and Severus Snape to a nightclub. And sure, I'll give props to the Arctic Monkeys for executing that sort of song so well, but that sure as hell doesn't make it remotely pleasant to listen to. And here's the other unfortunate and probably really unfair thing. It's really, really hard for me not to compare the Arctic Monkeys with Franz Ferdinand. Maybe it's the similar guitar work and strong technical songwriting that the both acts share, but every time I listen to the Arctic Monkeys and their acrid blend of unpleasantness, I can't help but think that those dudes over in Franz Ferdinand just sound like they're bringing a much better party. I get that there's a place for bitterness in music, and arguably the Arctic Monkeys execute their morose emotions better than most, but it sure as hell isn't an enjoyable or moving experience in the slightest. One of the other interesting factors with the Arctic Monkeys is that the band has followed something of a similar career trajectory to Franz Ferdinand, starting with two strong, critically acclaimed albums right out of the gate, before attempting to switch things up a bit for their third album. For the Arctic Monkeys on Humbug, that album, they slowed things down and attempted to make their instrumentation sound a little bit more grandiose. But at the same time, many of the lyrics that went by too quickly to fully sink in on previous albums now had plenty of room to breathe and reveal the unpleasant truth. The narrator, Alex Turner, writes, is an asshole. Maybe it has something to do with the pseudo not trying delivery or the fact that every single one of the songs are filled with these needling little insults, but it really reveals a whole new layer of unpleasantness, reminiscent of Ethan Hawke's character in Reality Bites, the snide jackass who is so smart, he's chosen to only interact with the world via smug observations. And what's really grating is that more often than not, we're supposed to sympathize with, or at least identify with the narrator because a lot of his observations, crass as they might be, are at least intelligent, and we're supposed to shove to the back of our mind that the fact that he's really quite the hipster asshole, which is framing that frankly I find hard to accept. Now, all of that being said, I do think the lyrics improved a bit on the next album, Suck It and See, mostly because the poetry got a little bit more benign and, dare I say it, mature. Some of the snide petulance had faded from Alex Turner's delivery, and with the songwriting as sharp as ever, he grew marginally more tolerable, and the album was significantly less unpleasant for me to listen through. But at the same time, I kind of missed the high-energy instrumentation from those first two albums, and while I still think that the Arctic Monkeys wouldn't quite still be my thing if they returned to that instrumentation, mostly thanks to Alex Turner's delivery, I do think that it would have incorporated the best of both worlds. As I said, I can recognize talent and solid work when I hear it. And while there is issues with the Arctic Monkeys that still get on my nerves and prevent me from liking them, I know that some of these issues are my issues. And what's key is separating my personal grievances with the band with legitimate problems that they might have. So with that hefty challenge in mind, what do I think of the newest Arctic Monkeys album, AM? Oh boy. Well, I can say this, I definitely was not expecting this album, and given that I have something of a tempestuous relationship with this band, I know you can't tell, right? I wasn't expecting to come to the conclusion that I did. AM by the Arctic Monkeys is a decent enough album, but I bet fans of the band are going to hate it, particularly if you're a fan of their earlier material. Now I should explain, and the best place to start is with the instrumentation. On this album you get two very divergent styles of instrumentation. On the one hand, a stripped down and hollow, slow burn of an album for about half of it, with little in the terms of breakdowns or wild instrumental forays that occasionally spiced up their earlier work. And then on the other hand, you have the rest of the album is this fuzz-saturated, generally placid and agreeable indie rock that might just be the softest material the Arctic Monkeys have ever made. It's definitely a jarring shift from track to track, and also leads to a major disparity in quality across the board that I'll come back to. The fact is that even though the Arctic Monkeys have slowed down and simplified their riffs significantly on this album, the songs leading towards darker emotions are just a better fit for the rougher instrumentation of the band. The more frustrated melodies are still catchy and are significantly stronger, if only because they're more memorable and rely more heavily on the riffs to carry them. But then again, the Arctic Monkeys have never had a problem in this regard. When they want to, they can write catchy, memorable songs. It does become an issue, though, on the slower tracks, which lack these hooks or indeed much driving momentum at all. I can appreciate something of the homage to the late 60s psychedelia that I'm guessing Alex Turner was going for here, but instead it starts sounding more than a little like Edward Sharpe in the Magnetic Zeros in the worst possible way. And I really hate saying this, but Alex Turner is smarter than this particular material makes him out to be. And really, none of these songs are even memorable enough in this vein to be worth hating. Once again, I get the homage, but say what you will about Edward Sharpe, he at least throws himself into the tracks with reckless abandon and seems dedicated to those songs. Now this comes back to a problem with Alex Turner's delivery, where I think in the course of writing this review, I managed to mostly identify my big issue with it: detachment. Alex Turner rarely sounds as if he's engaged in the song that he's singing, to the point where several times I wondered if he was even trying. As I've said before, if you're not emotionally invested in your material, then why the hell should I care? But the bigger problem comes through in the fact that without that investment, so many of the songs either feel snide, sarcastic, or completely insincere. And while I'm sure all three elements have existed in the Arctic Monkeys' discography throughout their careers, it's a really bad fit for this album, particularly on songs where I get the feeling that Alex Turner was trying to be sincere. I have no idea what level of irony this album operates on, if any at all, which makes any sort of emotional resonance I might get from it distinctly confused and underwhelming. But what's even worse fit for this album is the sudden appearance of falsetto, just like on Come Down Machine from the Strokes earlier this year. Now I'll give Alex Turner this, his falsetto is better than Julian Casablancas, but I get even less emotional delivery from this vocal range, and to me it sounds very discordant with the Arctic Monkeys' harder instrumentation on their better tracks. It might fit a little bit better on the more psychedelic tracks, but it still isn't very good, and it really adds nothing to the atmosphere of the songs other than another layer to grate on my nerves. And now we're gonna have to talk about the thing that is sure to make Arctic Monkeys fans scream bloody murder when they listen to this album: the songwriting. I said earlier in this review that one of the elements about early Arctic Monkeys that left a sour taste in my mouth was the acrid, very bitter songwriting that seemed to regard everything with contempt. And when I said that I was in favor of them toning that back, I meant keeping the fire while maybe adding morally ambiguous framing or additional context in the lyrics that would justify some of that venom. That certainly seemed to be the direction they were taking on Suckin' and See by replacing some of that petulance and putting in some maturity instead. But with AM, the Arctic Monkeys seem to have jettisoned all the vitriol entirely, replacing it with curdled frustration and some seriously besotted lyrics, particularly on the slower tracks. The harder songs deal with topics like uncertain relationships, and the frustration is a natural fit. But on the slower songs like Number One Party Anthem and I Wanna Be Yours and Mad Sounds sound so clumsy and utterly infatuated that I started wondering what the hell happened to Alex Turner. It also doesn't help matters that the technical songwriting takes a noticeable dive on those slower tracks, lacking some of the sharp wit that made the Arctic Monkeys stand out, so much to the point that I was wondering whether or not they were performing the songs ironically. But with Alex Turner's half-engaged delivery, that's impossible to tell. Now, I recognize that some of these are trends that started on Suck It and See, but it's definitely emphasized here and not in a good way. But even the songs that are harsher and more frustrated don't seem to be quite as sharply written as the albums that came before. Yeah, songs like Arabella might paint an interesting picture of a girl with some technically good poetry, but the track feels so much more basic than the Arctic Monkeys are capable of. Despite the issues that I've had with this band, the one thing that I've consistently been able to count upon is songwriting that is at least marginally challenging and reasonably interesting. And with this album, I was very much underwhelmed. And here's the part that kind of depresses me. I get the feeling that the simplification was intentional, keeping a lot of the technical wordplay while making the concepts behind the songs a little bit more radio-friendly and accessible. Hell, I wouldn't have much of a problem seeing songs from this album chart on the radio, at least on the alternative charts. But here's my issue with it. When Tegan and Sara released Heartthrob earlier this year, I thought the album was a good natural fit for their more pop-centric songwriting. But with the Arctic Monkeys, I feel like the instrumentation and the songwriting have been simplified to court the mainstream when that simplification in the songwriting isn't necessary. In a comparison, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds were criticized initially for opting for a slow burn album with The Good Son after the gothic excesses of Tender Prey. But Nick Cave made sure that even when he slowed down and simplified the instrumentation, he kept his characteristic lyrics as intelligent and layered as they've always been. I have no problem with the Arctic Monkeys simplifying their instrumentation in order to court a larger audience, as long as I keep it catchy, which for the most part they do. But their songwriting needs to grow and mature, not devolve into the frustrated romantic ramblings of a college student. Articulate, but lacking any true emotional impact. Look, I don't think I'm ever going to find the Arctic Monkeys my thing. It still bewilders me that they don't work, but it's something that I've come to accept. With that in mind, I can still recommend a few of the tracks on this album, like Do I Wanna Know, and Why You'd Only Call Me When You're High, and Snap Out of It, and maybe Knee Socks in a pinch. But most of this album was a real disappointment to me, and I'm not even a fan of this band. To me, it's an artistic step in a direction that can work instrumentally, but doesn't work on a songwriting level, and Alex Turner's seeming lack of investment on the songs does little to endear me. If you're a fan of the Arctic Monkeys, well, I honestly have no idea how you're going to react to this album. Again, I suspect some of you are really going to hate this change. But that being said, even though it's not my thing, it's definitely not bad, and it's probably worth a look. If this review, for some reason, made you intrigued enough to take a look at this album, go check out AM by the Arctic Monkeys. I'll say this as somebody who knows. You could definitely be listening to a lot worse. So yeah, if you'd like to like and subscribe, the second wave of albums coming out in the next couple days is going to be kind of crazy, so I've got lots of reviews on the way. See you next time.